There's no CBA deal? The players don't want to agree to what the owners are proposing? Perfect. Grab Asia Wilson, grab Sabrina, grab Sophie, grab the superstar, the main attraction, Caitlin Clark, and let's start this league fresh. Get rid of all the old, bitter players that think they're entitled to something. Pay those 5 ladies and move on from scratch.
That's not a hot take. That's a nuclear option being discussed openly by WNBA commentators right now. Replace the entire veteran core, start fresh with Caitlin Clark, Asia Wilson, Sabrina Ionescu, and Angel Reese. Let the old guard walk. And what's terrifying is that this isn't coming from some random troll account. This is a serious conversation happening as the WNBA and its Players Association remain locked in what's becoming the most bitter labor dispute in women's sports history. The CBA deadline passed Friday, no deal. No extension, just a moratorium on league business, while both sides continue negotiations that have completely broken down, and the question everyone's asking isn't whether they'll reach a deal anymore, it's whether this league survives what comes next.
They've tried forever to get noticed by the mainstream. In comes Caitlin Clark, finally they get noticed. They've tried so long to get paid what they think that they're owed. In comes Caitlin Clark. Owners actually see someone that can make them dollar signs and they say, you know what? We'll compromise with you guys. We'll give $1 million contracts to some max players. Average salaries of over $500,000. Minimum salaries $250,000. We're willing to compromise. But the players believe that they're entitled to more money. The old guard fans have brainwashed them into thinking that they are entitled into more money.
Here's the timeline that led to this moment. For 27 years, the WNBA operated at a loss while players fought for recognition. Then Caitlin Clark arrived in April 2024, and everything changed overnight. The Indiana Fever went from playing in half-empty arenas to selling out every single game. Over 1.5 million new fans came to WNBA games during Clark's rookie season. Television ratings for Fever games averaged 1.8 million viewers, compared to 400,000 for games without her. Suddenly, team owners saw something they'd never seen before: actual profit potential. Real revenue growth, legitimate investment opportunities. So when CBA negotiations began in January, the owners came to the table with what they considered a generous offer: increase revenue sharing from 9% to 15%. Raise the average salary to over $500,000. Set the minimum salary at $250,000. Create $1 million max contracts for star players. The players rejected it immediately. They want 30% revenue sharing calculated before expenses, not after. And that's where this entire negotiation fell apart.
The WNBA and Women's National Basketball Players Association have reached an agreement on a moratorium for league business, sources told ESPN on Monday. The moratorium is necessary because the sides failed to reach an agreement on a new collective bargaining agreement or an extension of the previous one by Friday's deadline. The sides continue to negotiate on a new CBA amid what's become a bitter impasse as they work toward what both sides acknowledge will be a transformative deal. They remain far apart on several key issues, including chiefly what a revenue sharing system should look like. Now, is it really bitter on the owner side? Probably not. They think they're going above and beyond with some of the things that they're willing to give them. Going from 9% revenue sharing to 15%. These crazy players want 30% of revenue sharing before expenses. Absolutely nuts.
The moratorium announced Monday is essentially a pause button on free agency. Teams can't make qualifying offers. Players can't sign new contracts. The entire offseason is frozen while negotiators try to find common ground on revenue sharing, salary structures, and business operations. But here's what makes this different from typical labor disputes. The people leading negotiations for the Players Union are Brianna Stewart and Ninga Ogwumike. Stewart co-founded Unrivaled, the 3-on-3 league that's positioning itself as an alternative to the WNBA. She's already said publicly that managing her unrivaled responsibilities on top of WNBA commitments is exhausting. She's got a financial stake in a competing league while negotiating the future of the WNBA. Think about that conflict of interest for a second. If the WNBA folds or contracts, unrivaled benefits. If top players walk away from the WNBA, unrivaled becomes more attractive to sponsors and networks. Stewart's sitting at the negotiating table with an incentive structure that doesn't necessarily align with saving the WNBA in its current form.
The players are bitter because they think that they're owed something that they haven't earned. The players are bitter. The players have things to lose. Well, not all of the players, but the players in the negotiating rooms. Breanna Stewart and Reese Collier. They would love it if WNBA folds. Unrivaled gets some players. Maybe that league turns to 5-on-5. They already see a future for Unrivaled. Breanna Stewart earlier this weekend said, oh man, it's so hard to compartmentalize. I mean, after the games, then I gotta go and take emails and phone calls and take places on this and take places on that. Wouldn't it just be easier if that league didn't exist anymore? That's what she's saying to herself. We move on. With the previous deal expired, the sides entered a period called status quo, in which the working conditions of the former CBA are maintained. WNBA front offices were told last week that teams should prepare to extend qualifying offers and core designations under the expired agreement, sources said. However, it was widely expected that players would not want to sign contracts while a new salary system was expected.
The owners aren't blameless here. They've lost money for 27 years. Sure, but they've also underinvested in marketing, relied entirely on NBA subsidies, and failed to build sustainable business models until Caitlin Clark forced them to take the league seriously. They're offering 15% revenue sharing like it's a gift, when NBA players get 50%. The gap is massive, but the player's position has its own problems. They're demanding 30% of revenue before expenses. That means before teams pay for arenas, travel, coaching staffs, medical personnel, marketing, and operations. It's a formula that would bankrupt half the league immediately. The Las Vegas Aces, owned by Mark Davis, might survive. The Indiana Fever, now backed by serious investment, would probably be fine, but teams like the Dallas Wings, the Atlanta Dream, the Washington Mystics, they'd fold within a year. And here's the part that's radicalizing commentators and fans. All but 2 veteran players sat out free agency this offseason, waiting for a new CBA with higher salaries. They're betting that owners will cave rather than lose an entire season. But what if the owners don't cave? What if they look at the numbers and realize that Caitlin Clark is the only player who's truly irreplaceable?
Just start fresh. Just start fresh. Call up Caitlin Clark and say, hey, Cece, we're moving on. You want to play in the WNBA? You could be our first player. Call Sophie. Hey, Sophie, you want to come play in the WNBA? You'll be our first player. What are the steps to just tear that up and start new? Seriously, fans won't care. Let me rephrase. The fans that actually move the needle won't care. The fans that help the Indiana Fever sell out won't care. The over 1.5 million fans that came to the league when Caitlin Clark joined, they won't care. At this point, many of those folks are saying, just lock them out. End this nonsense. Shut this league down. We are officially at the point where this bargaining and negotiating, it's turned into a pileup on the side of the road that people are now paying.
That's the replacement player scenario, and it's not as crazy as it sounds. During Clark's rookie season, the data was stark. Fever games averaged 1.8 million viewers. Games without Clark averaged 400,000. The WNBA Finals between New York and Minnesota, featuring Stewart and Nafisa Collier, drew 1.6 million for Game 5. Good numbers, sure, but they were inflated by the momentum Clark built all season. When she wasn't playing, interest dropped 75%. The playoffs proved it. First round without Clark, ratings down. Conference finals without Clark, ratings down. Even the finals, which should have been the pinnacle, felt like an afterthought compared to the regular season Fever games. Fans weren't asking, who's going to win the championship? They were asking, when does Caitlin play again? So you're an owner looking at this data. You've got a 22-year-old generational talent who sells out arenas and delivers television ratings. Then you've got veteran players demanding 30% of revenue while threatening to sit out the season. The math isn't complicated. You call Caitlin Clark's agent, you call Asia Wilson's agent, you call Sabrina Ionescu's agent. You offer them max contracts under whatever new structure you create. And you tell the veterans, thanks for your service, but we're moving forward without you.
This league is... it's losing steam. It's losing steam by the day. If interest levels were here when Caitlin Clark got here, dude, they're here. They might even be off the screen now. If interest levels were here when Caitlin Clark arrived, they've fallen off so fast. People don't even want to watch anything that doesn't have to do with Caitlin Clark. No one cares about Unrivaled. No one cared about the playoffs. No one cared about the finals. Oh, but the ratings. Yeah, but the ratings were inflated. Nobody paid attention. You look at Caitlin Clark games, you look at Indiana Fever games, and you look at non-Caitlin Clark games. There it is. Said it. Right there.
The momentum problem is real. When Clark arrived in April 2024, WNBA interest was at an all-time high. Social media was buzzing. Mainstream sports networks were covering women's basketball daily. Casual fans who'd never watched a WNBA game were suddenly buying Fever jerseys and planning trips to Indianapolis. By January 2025, that momentum had collapsed. Unrivaled launched to minimal fanfare. The CBA negotiations became a public mess. Fans who came for Caitlin Clark weren't sticking around for labor dispute updates and revenue-sharing debates. The off-season content was replacement player speculation and contract drama instead of highlight reels and championship aspirations. Interest levels that were at a 10 when Clark played her final regular season game are now at a 3, maybe a 2. The casual fans have moved on. The hardcore fans are exhausted by the negativity, and every day this drags on, more people forget why they cared in the first place. That's what makes this crisis existential. The WNBA finally broke through to mainstream relevance, and now it's squandering that opportunity with a labor dispute that makes both sides look petty and short-sighted.
This league has lost momentum, and it's all because of the players. Unwillingness to negotiate. Unwillingness to compromise. The owners have done their part, and as far as I'm concerned, move on without the old guard.
Here's the reality check that nobody wants to hear. If the WNBA doesn't exist next season, most fans won't notice. The 1.5 million people who came to games because of Caitlin Clark will watch her play wherever she ends up. If that's Unrivaled, they'll watch Unrivaled. If that's overseas, they'll stream EuroLeague games. If that's a new league built around her and 4 other stars, they'll follow that league. The fans who've supported the WNBA for 27 years will be devastated. The players who've dedicated their careers to building this league will lose their platform. The coaches, the support staff, the media members who cover women's basketball, they'll all suffer. But the casual fan who bought a Fever jersey and watched Clark's games on their phone, they're not invested in the institution. They're invested in the player. And that's the leverage owners have. That's why the replacement player conversation isn't just talk radio nonsense. It's a genuine strategic option. So where does this end? 3 scenarios, none of them good. Scenario 1. The players cave. They accept something closer to the owner's 15% offer, maybe bump it to 20%, and sign a new CBA. The veterans feel betrayed. The union looks weak. But the league survives, and everyone moves forward with resentment simmering under the surface. This is the most likely outcome, but it leaves deep wounds that'll affect team chemistry and league culture for years. Scenario 2. The owners cave. They agree to something closer to 30% revenue sharing. Half the teams go bankrupt within 3 years, and the league contracts from 12 teams to 6 or 7. the surviving teams are owned by billionaires who can absorb losses, but hundreds of players lose their jobs. The WNBA becomes a boutique league for elite talent only. This scenario satisfies the union's demands while destroying the very thing they're fighting for. Scenario 3. Nobody caves. The 2025 season is canceled. Caitlin Clark signs with Unrivaled or goes overseas. Other stars follow. The WNBA either folds entirely or becomes irrelevant, replaced by whatever league manages to sign the marquee players. This is the nuclear option, and every day this drags on, it becomes more likely. What makes this particularly tragic is that the WNBA was finally positioned for sustainable growth. Caitlin Clark delivered the mainstream attention. Expansion teams in San Francisco, Portland, and Toronto were supposed to launch in 2026 and 2027, bringing in $300 million in expansion fees. New television deals were being negotiated with significantly higher rights fees. Corporate sponsors were lining up. All of that evaporates. If there's no 2025 season, expansion teams will back out, television networks will walk away. Sponsors will redirect their budgets to other women's sports. The momentum that took 27 years to build will disappear in 6 months. And here's the thing that should terrify everyone involved. The fans who came because of Caitlin Clark don't care about CBA negotiations or revenue-sharing percentages. They don't have loyalty to the institution. They have loyalty to the player. If she's not playing, they're not watching. And if the league that was supposed to showcase her talent self-destructs in a labor dispute, those fans will blame everyone involved and move on to something else. The veterans who are demanding 30% revenue sharing believe they've earned it through years of underpayment and underappreciation. They're not wrong about the history, but they're miscalculating the present. The leverage they think they have doesn't exist. The irreplaceability they're counting on isn't real. Because the one truly irreplaceable player, Caitlin Clark, isn't leading this negotiation. She's watching it unfold, probably wondering if she made a mistake choosing the WNBA over overseas leagues that would have paid her more. The owners who are offering 15% think they're being generous compared to the 9% players currently receive. They're not wrong about the math, but they're miscalculating the optics. To the public, to the media, to the fans, it looks like billionaires nickel and diming women athletes, while NBA players get 50%. The perception gap is massive, and perception matters when you're trying to build a fan base. So both sides are right about their grievances and wrong about their strategies. Both sides have legitimate arguments and terrible execution. Both sides want the league to succeed, but are willing to destroy it rather than compromise. And that's why the replacement player conversation isn't going away. Because at some point, an owner is going to look at this mess and think, why am I negotiating with people who don't move the needle? Why am I trying to save jobs for players who fans don't care about? Why don't I just build around the 5 players who actually matter and start fresh? That owner might be wrong. That strategy might backfire. But when you're looking at a canceled season, hundreds of millions in lost revenue, and a fan base that's already checking out, the nuclear option starts looking rational. The WNBA had one job this offseason: sign a new CBA, announce the expansion teams, build on the Caitlin Clark momentum, and position the league for long-term growth. Instead, they've turned the offseason into a public relations disaster that's alienating fans, embarrassing sponsors, and proving every skeptic right who said women's basketball couldn't sustain mainstream interest. 3 months ago, the WNBA was the hottest property in women's sports. Today, it's a cautionary tale about snatching defeat from the jaws of victory. And unless something changes dramatically in the next few weeks, we're going to look back at 2024 as the year the WNBA peaked and then collapsed under the weight of its own dysfunction. So here's the question you need to answer in the comments. If you're a WNBA owner, and the players won't budge on 30% revenue sharing, do you cancel the season? Do you try the replacement player strategy, or do you cave to their demands and hope half your league doesn't go bankrupt? Because one of those 3 things is happening, and none of them end well. Let me know what you think happens next.